How's it going, guys? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is Deck Ready, my channel all about the Steam Deck. In today's video, I've got 3 topics to cover. The first one is that Switch 2 specs have leaked from Moore's Law is Dead, who is very reliable, and it looks like the Steam Deck is going to remain on top when it comes to performance. In the second news story, we're going to revisit a story from 2 videos ago where I talked about the new Nexus mod manager, and now you can try it with Stardew Valley. And third, there's an upcoming survival horror game that I feel like is going to be a perfect fit for the Steam Deck. Look, before I jump into it, I got to do the YouTuber thing. I'm sorry, just give me a couple of seconds here. Basically, like 80% of the people who watch this channel are not subscribed to it. So whether you've been here for a while and you enjoy the content, or even if you think it's mid, it would really help me out if you subscribed and set your notifications to all so that you get notifications when I post my videos. Because if you click those, I get helped out because YouTube goes, oh, people want to watch this. And then they feed it out to new people who can then watch my Steam Deck videos, and my army of Steam Deck users will grow. So let's jump into the first news story here, which is all about how the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to compare to the Steam Deck. I mean, this is just an obvious question to ask because the Steam Deck, kind of when it came around, all the news stories that came out about it were like, hey, are you worried about the performance of your Switch and not being great because you can barely run games at 30 FPS at 720p? Well, here's the Steam Deck. It will not only run the same games at the same settings, but you might even be able to get 60 or even 40 FPS out of a lot of those games at higher resolutions. And that was a big reason why I bought the Steam Deck and why I haven't really touched my Nintendo Switch outside of playing Mario Wonder last year. And before, I was buying everything on the Switch, like every game, whether it was Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, Resident Evil Revelations 1 and 2, Resident Evil HD Remake, Resident Evil 4, like I was buying so many games on the Switch. And I gotta be honest, once I got the Steam Deck and I could take advantage of owning those games already on my Steam library and also bring along the saves from when I played those games originally, it just really removed a lot of the need that I had for a Nintendo Switch. And even though I have an OLED, it is just collecting dust behind my camera on the TV over there, except for when I played Mario Wonder, like I just said. But the one thing that could really bring me back in at the very least for first-party Nintendo games is if this thing is on par with the Steam Deck or maybe even a little better performing. And I wasn't necessarily expecting that because when the original Switch came out, it was using like an NVIDIA Tegra mobile chip that was already old by the time the Switch came out. It was like 3 or 4 years old at that point. So it was already behind the times when this thing launched. Obviously, Nintendo never really has had to bank on graphics. They rely on more stylized looks for their games and better performance and things like that. So it wasn't that big of a deal. And it seemed like that chip was keeping up for at least the first few years. Like during lockdown, I was buying Switch games left and right. But like I said earlier, I kind of fell off pretty quickly once the performance ceiling was hit. So all that to say is I didn't really expect the Switch 2 to be an extreme powerhouse, but it looks like Nintendo is going a little bit harder to future-proof the Switch 2 when it comes to performance, which is great. So based on his rumors, essentially what he's saying is that in handheld mode, the Switch 2 will run at around 5 watts, which is a pretty healthy sweet spot, I would say. Like, it is pretty low, but if you're playing a lot of older games and remasters from the PS3 and Xbox 360 generation, the goal a lot of people have is to run them at around 5 watts because that will result in a lot more battery life, which is Nintendo's goal. Like, everything that they want to do with the Switch is in service of getting good battery life out of it, which I think is smart because the regular Switch has pretty abysmal battery life. Like the Switch OLED, or if you got the red box Switch when they re-released it to stop that hardware mod people were doing to play free games, that one has decent battery life, but when you compare that to the Steam Deck OLED, it's really apples and oranges. The Steam Deck OLED can go almost all day, whereas the Switch or even the Switch OLED can last you a good 2 to 3 hours if you're playing conservatively, like with the brightness down all the way. But the cool thing is they are keeping around the whole thing where you can take it portably and then dock it when you get home to an included dock. And this time around, unlike being a glorified USB-C to HDMI hub, the Nintendo Switch 2 dock is going to have fanless cooling, and through that, they're going to be able to run it between 15 and 30 watts, which is a huge performance jump. So because Nintendo is really trying to keep their mantra as longevity of battery life and longevity of the console as a whole with this thing, they're not really going to be pushing the performance all that much, and they're not really even going for high frame rates. So when you dock this thing, theoretically the Switch 2 will be running at higher resolutions but lower frame rates. And the way he kind of scaled it out in his YouTube video is that if a game runs at 60 FPS on the Steam Deck, it'll run at 40 FPS on the Nintendo Switch 2. If a game runs well at 40 FPS on the Steam Deck, it'll run at 30 FPS or so on the Nintendo Switch 2, but the Switch's edge is that it'll have things like DLSS and be able to upscale to higher resolutions, and it'll have a more consistent frame rate out of the box. Obviously, because it's a console, it's not going to have graphics settings and everything like that. Like, the settings will be dialed in in on the device to get the best resolution possible and the most consistent frame rate possible, which again will result in lower average frame rates. And as a Steam Deck fan, like, I think that's perfectly fine. Nintendo has never really been a technological powerhouse type of company, and I feel like when you talk about the audiences for these two devices, they could not be more different. Like on the Steam Deck, you can not only play AAA games that just came out, like Elden Ring's DLC, you can also play games going all the way back to the Nintendo NES or the Super Nintendo or the PS1 or the PS2. You can even play games from the PS3 and 360 generation, and if you have some technical know-how, you can dump your Nintendo Switch carts to your PC and play those games at better settings on your Steam Deck. The audience as a whole for the Steam Deck, I think, is a lot more like technology focused and trying to get the best frame rates and the best graphics possible out of games, whereas on the Nintendo Switch, I mean, the most popular game ever for that thing was Animal Crossing New Horizons. It's going for the completely casual audience who I'd argue doesn't even see frame rate. I mean, like, I talk to my wife and I try to show her when a game drops frames to show her why I get so frustrated when I'm trying to dial in settings on my main gaming PC, and she's like, sorry dude, I literally cannot see it. And a lot of people are that way as well. So that's kind of like the audience that I feel like the Nintendo Switch 2 is trying to capture. So all that to say is, like, yeah, this thing is really cool and it's probably going to sell a lot more units than the Steam Deck, but I was just interested in the whole philosophy behind getting better resolution versus better frame rates. And it seems like even though they have a little bit more of a technological advantage by using a newer chip in this thing, it's not really going to shake out as a more performant device. So it's pretty much the same story as like the ROG Ally using the Z1 Extreme that was supposed to run laps around the Steam Deck and totally decimate it and render it obsolete. We all saw how that shook out. I mean, go down to your local Best Buy and check out the ROG Ally section. It's going to be a ton of open box handhelds. I almost said consoles, but the ROG Ally is a handheld. So yeah, some interesting stuff going on with the Nintendo Switch 2. I'm curious what you think down in the comments below. Anyway, that brings us to the second news story here, which is all about that modding app that I talked about last week. The new Nexus Mods app, which is great because Vortex, as good as it is, it's kind of been stacked on top of itself over and over again over the past like decade or so, and it feels like there's way more features than it actually needs. So at the time I talked about it, the app was in pre-alpha state and it doesn't actually work with a lot of the games that I feel like people would want to use it with, like Fallout 4 or Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim, but right now you can actually download and test it on your Steam Deck with a very popular Steam Deck game, which is Stardew Valley. So if you go ahead and download this, what you're going to be able to do is install mods for Stardew Valley on Steam and GOG. They say that Xbox Game Pass support is coming later. That's really irrelevant to me as a Steam Deck user. It says you'll be able to log into your Nexus Mods account and download mods directly from the website. You'll be able to cleanly enable and disable mods in your loadout, easily roll your games in a non-modded state by unmanaging the game and uninstalling the app. Then you'll be able to get diagnostic issues about common issues in your load order, including missing dependencies, SMAPI or game version issues. And finally, it'll tell you if you have a potentially dangerous mod installed, which is cool. And then the last feature it has is it'll let you edit the INI for the game, which is essential if you ask me. So like I mentioned, it's in a pretty rough state, and I personally don't play a lot of Stardew Valley, so I'm really curious if you're someone who decides to go try this out. Please let me know how it all works in the comments below. But yeah, the reason this is so exciting, if you missed the video when I talked about this, I think it was 2 videos ago, is that you don't really have an official Nexus option on the Steam Deck right now. There is Mod Organizer 2, and while it's not technically like super difficult to set up, it's also not like the easiest thing in the world to set up. And at the end of the day, I would just prefer a one-click solution where you download the app, install it, and then it finds your game and gets everything ready to go. I hope this works well for Stardew Valley, and then it kind of opens the door for other games that I'd be more interested in testing out, like Fallout 4, for example. I got that Fallout kick going when the show came out. I got everything set up with mods on my Steam Deck, and I am in like 30 or 40 hours into a new save that I started after abandoning my like max level character. I know you can't hit max level in Fallout 4, but like if you could, I'm pretty dang close to it. I'm pretty sure my original save from all the way back in 2015, there are only a few perks that I still have yet to unlock. So like I had pretty much done everything in the game. I was ready for something new. And while yeah, it was fun and easy setting up Mod Organizer 2, again, I just like would be more excited if there was a one-click solution that didn't have to replace the game's launcher, because I love when I just jump into bed and I want to play a game game, starting up the game, jumping right into it. I don't like that extra step of having to use the touch screen to hit the absolutely tiny little play button and make sure that everything launches with all my mods. That has stopped me from playing Fallout 4 in beta a couple of times. I would just prefer an app that installs all the mods, gets them all ready to go, and then when you launch things from Steam, it loads the modded version directly and everything is all set. And that brings us to the third news story in today's video, which is all about a game I'm excited to play later this year. You guys know I'm a huge horror fan here on the channel. I mean, look at my mask set up back there. Like, I am a massive horror fan. The way I got my start on YouTube was by talking about Halloween back when Halloween 2018 was coming out. So I like to play a lot of horror games on my Steam Deck, and one I'm extremely excited about is A Quiet Place: The Road Ahead. This one's coming from Saber Interactive, who I'm always rooting for behind the scenes because I've loved pretty much everything they put out. I'm a huge fan of Mud Runner. I have like over 100 hours in it. I love World War Z. It was a great sort of counter to what we got with Back 4 Blood, which I don't think was very good at all. I'm super excited for Space Marine, John Carpenter's Toxic Commando, the Jurassic Park survival game they're working on. Like, they have a ton of irons in the fire, but this new Quiet Place game looks very Alien Isolation inspired, and I like that they're not doing the thing they used to do when I was growing up, where they would not finish a game just to make sure it released when the movie came out. If you didn't know, A Quiet Place Day 1 is out right now, and I saw it, and I think it's another win for the franchise. But yeah, they could have just rushed it out the door and released it with the movie, but they're taking their time with it. And from the gameplay we've seen, not only does it look really good, but based on the pedigree of Saber Interactive games, I think it's pretty safe to expect that this will work on the Steam Deck. And if you've never seen the Quiet Place movies, basically the whole crux of it is there's like an alien invasion and they have really good hearing, so the way to avoid them is to be extremely quiet. John Krasinski directed the first one, and he's the main character in it, and they've come up with some really cool ways to stay silent, like you making a path of sand that goes all the way into the small town, so when they need food or medicine, they can just take a little quiet path into town. And it looks like all of that stuff is being translated into the game, which I think is great. I also think it's cool that it's going to have an original story set in the universe, so it'll be kind of like a side thing, sort of like the new movie is. And I think the Steam Deck is great for horror games like this, where all you're really doing is walking around and hiding, because you can kind of like pull the covers over your head or play in a dark basement or something like that. Grab a pair of really good noise canceling headphones, because sound is such an essential part of horror. And yeah, I think this is going to be a great experience on the device. Hopefully it runs well, but based on the gameplay trailer, it doesn't look too graphically demanding. And again, because of Saber's pedigree, I really have no expectations that this won't run well. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you today. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.